Welcome back, crew. Today we're going to be diving into solo tabletop RPGs. So that's something I've been getting a little bit more interested in lately, especially after my recent playthrough with Symbaroum using parts per million's solo run, as well as the One Ring using the Strider mode by Free League. It's just something I think it's a really cool feature that I think a lot of people in the tabletop space, before this myself included, just ignore, just don't really think about too much. And just one of the big reasons for this, I think, because everybody always thinks they're gonna when you have a tabletop RPG, it's gonna always gonna be at the table with a crew of gamers around you, kind of making a story together, and that's definitely my preferred experience for it. But if you've played or run, been a game master, sitting at a table, you know that with tabletop RPGs, it can be hard to match up schedules. It can especially be hard to find a group of gamers that you kind of vibe with and are interested in telling the same type of stories you are. And I think that's where solo tabletop RPGs feel a really cool space where they can let people whose schedule may not allow it. I know a couple of my friends have children, and that could be a pain in trying to find a good game night. Or people who just may not be ready to jump fully into the tabletop space due to just distance or don't want to play online or anxiety, whatever it may be. I think solo tabletop RPGs can be something that helps them get into the game and still have some fun and get to tell some stories and see what the dice fall. So I'm going to go over today. We're going to break it into three categories. We're going to kind of go over how to run solo TTRPGs a bit. This is going to be a high level overview. As I said, I'm still new to this myself. But definitely keep an eye on the channel. I'm going to be doing more of them. I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's a really cool piece for it. We're gonna go over some one things I like about them, some of the core benefits that you get, I think, as a game master for running solo tabletops for yourself. And we're just gonna go over a couple cool ones that I've played. It's gonna be a pretty short list, but some ones I've played and one I want to run in the future. Yeah, let's go to the core tenets of tabletop RPGs for solo play. Because I think this is going to be one of the areas where people get tripped up a little bit. Because I think a lot of people love to play, and this is myself included, play RPGs to see what types of stories can be told with the game master collaborating with the crew of players and seeing kind of what they come up with together. And I think sometimes when you feel like you have a solo play, you lose a little bit of that because it's usually just it's going to be kind of you're coming up with ideas, and you're not going to have, and you feel like you may not have those unique experiences that come up with the tabletop, with the whole table coming in and just the kind of the craziness and chaos that comes from that. But even though I only have had a little bit of experience with solo RPGs, you still get a lot of that chaos because the dice are really with solo RPGs, you really have the dice running a lot of the story. So like with the Strider mode or even with Parts Per Million's Symborum RPG, we rolled those dice. We got to see what types of scenarios were coming up for us. And I think it really kind of gives you a good bit of thinking on your feet as well, whether it be if you usually play as a player or as a game master. I think really one of the core tenets of a solo player RPG is how fast you can kind of think on your feet, what types of stories or what type of scenarios you can come up with based off the guidelines of the RPG, as well as the core tenet of any solo player RPG, telling a fun story. And I feel like a lot of people, especially if they're usually on the player side, think if you're solo, how are you going to be able to challenge yourself because it's going to be you versus you. But I feel like and this should be true for any tabletop RPG, but I think it's especially true for solo plays. You should really be utilizing kind of your creative hat and thinking what we do to really advance the story, what's going to be the most dramatic, what's going to really come through and surprise yourself. And then either running those through the kind of the mechanisms of solo RPG. A lot of them have cool roll tables and different set pieces and different enemies and things you can bring in when you need to kind of have that variety, that spark of creativity in there. But definitely kind of taking what they feed out to you and then just working them into a story, working them into some fun encounters. It just really, I think it was a blast to read. It's a little tiring, especially if you do one stream like I have. You're talking a lot, but it's just really cool because you get to really stretch your creative muscles and really come up with some fun scenarios. And you're just kind of thinking about the story because a lot of times as the game master, you always want to think the cool story, but a lot of times you're thinking about player enjoyments, how to run, how to keep everybody involved, how to keep everything moving. With solo player RPG, you're just literally thinking about the story, and I think that's just kind of fun, and that's just a really unique feature for it. And as we get into the benefits, we're going to go over some of those there. I think that's really a major benefit too. But one of the other big things I'll address too with kind of the core tenets of solo RPGs, and I think this is the one where people initially kind of have it kind of a little biased against it, we'll say, because they think it's more like a choose your own adventure versus kind of having a full fleshed out creative craziness. that is usually gameplay at a tabletop. But the dice really are in control here, and a lot of the solo play RPGs I've played have really cool tables and really cool options to make it so you're not sure exactly what's going to happen. And I'm going to pick on my Symbaroum game I did recently because that's where we had with Cinero, and he got into a situation kind of following the dice. Where he probably should have died. But it was really fun because we were rolling the dice on the open, kind of having them tell the story he got trapped in there with a necromancer and some skeletons, and he literally was able to get out, follow the rules of the system with the dice, kind of just going through and got some really lucky rolls for himself. And was able to survive what would have been like usually a certain death on that side. And it's kind of really one of those fun stories that can emerge when. Because sometimes the game master, you always have kind of that framework in your mind what's going to happen, but when you're the storyteller and the player, it's really and putting like the fate in the dice's hands, it's really one of those cool things that can pop up and surprise you. It just really tells stories you didn't expect to tell. So, highly recommend solo play RPGs for that. But that's just kind of a little bit about the medium itself. One of the really big things I think it works well with, and this is true for both players and GMs, we've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's great for stretching your creative muscles because you're the game master, even like experienced game master, you're usually used to bouncing off of your players. I've had sessions before. I think most game masters will, where your players aren't really bouncing back. I think playing solo RPGs will be a really good kind of medium for getting experience when your players aren't kind of holding up their end, where whether it may just be tiredness or whatever, for being able to get some fun scenarios to hopefully bounce something out that they can't help but bounce back. And I think solo plays are really where you can kind of just hone your skills on that point, especially with describing things and different aspects like that, because you could really just go all in with it and just really get a little bit more practice into it when you're not at the high pressure scenario with the table staring back at you. So that's definitely one of my favorite benefits for it. Outside of that, I think it's a great way to learn the rules of the system in a low pressure scenario because I did it with both Symbaroum and the One Ring. And it's just kind of cool being able to look through different pieces as well as just kind of learn how the system works without having to kind of manage the table at the same time. Another cool thing with it too is I think it's just kind of a fun surprise. Like it's low stakes. It's just you, and you get to roll the dice and you get to see what comes up. You don't have to worry about. And I've never done a campaign solo play. That may be a fun thing to do, but I've always done one shots with it. I think it's fun for one shots because you don't have to really worry about how it's impacting the story. It's just you kind of going through. Playing with the system, seeing how the mechanics work, telling a fun story in a low key scenario. And my experience with this, and kind of another benefit too, my experience with this has mostly been streamed, where I'm trying to keep it entertaining while I go too. But if you're just playing for yourself, like it's gonna be one of those ones you can just really do with low stakes, really take your time with it, and just really get to know the system, get to know its functions before you bring it to a table. So I really recommend it for that portion. I really think if more game masters, in particular, but players too, used solo plays to kind of get into new RPGs, it will just really help them feel more confident in running it without the full pressure of the players being at the kind of your beck and call behind you. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about some of the core tenets, some of the things I like about it. Um, I've only played two so far. The One Ring by Strider's the One Ring mode, as well as Symbarum's solo play by Parts Per Million. That's a third party one for them. But yeah, it's just those were both really cool, and I think fun settings to do so. And I think their systems work really well for it. 'Cause that's one of the other things I think you have to look into when you're doing a system for solo play is if they're kind of the mechanics and some of the pieces work well with it. Like both those two worked perfectly for it because you didn't have to set DCs. You knew if you hit or not based off of your own attributes, so you didn't need a game master to spit those out. And I think when you're looking for different solo play games, like, those should be the ones you kind of steer towards. Because like I'm going to pick on Pathfinder or Pathfinder's actually if you their DC tables works pretty well with it. But Pathfinder or D&D 5e, those ones can be a little bit harder because a lot of those are kind of game master set, where the game master has to kind of set the DCs, set the pass fail rates, and all of that, which can be a little bit harder to do for a solo RPG and not feel like you're metagaming a little bit. So I really think some of the ones where the attributes set your tell the tale could work well for it. Like another one too, I've never tried a Powered by the Apocalypse style game, but I think that could be another good one that works well for it because you know you just roll the dice and you know what they're going to be doing automatically. That would be a little harder too, 'cause I feel like sometimes with the PBTA style games, you just need that table enthusiasm. But you could be enthusiastic yourself and keep it running, I guess. One new one, which I want to kind of give a shout out for. I've been reading it; it seems pretty sick so far. Keep an eye out for the channel. We're gonna be running this one too. We're gonna be running Rune. That's one of the best solo play TTRPGs I've heard from just kind of Reddit diving and forum diving. So I've kind of picked it up, and sometime either this month or next month, I'm gonna run a game with it. I want to do more solo plays because I've really had a blast with it with Symbaroum and Free League, and One Ring by Free League. And I think I'm gonna bring more of them to the table. 'Cause I think they're an area in the tabletop space that could really deserve a big shout out and help people that either just due to time commitments, anxiety commitments, whatever it may be, just may not be able to get into the space, have a pathway to still participate and have some fun and tell some stories themselves. So big shout out to that. Overall, in the comments, throw out some cool things or some cool solo tabletop RPGs or just some cool things about the medium as a whole. Because I'm really gonna be diving into this more. I may make this a series as we get into more and different solo TTRPGs. But I think it's just a really cool piece that doesn't get enough recognition. So shout them out below, like, subscribe. We're gonna be going through Call of Cthulhu, one of the biggest RPGs in the space this month. So stay tuned for that. And as always, crew, till next time.